welcome to the Center for Brooklyn History. I am so happy to see people, real live people in this room. Thank you for joining us, for being together here. It's actually only the second time that we have had an in-person program since COVID. And in fact, this building where we are right now is not open to the public. It is closed and has been closed since March. But for these special programs, we are opening. So thank you for being here. It's great to have you all. My name is Marcia Eli. I am the Director of Programs here at Center for Brooklyn History. And you may know it as the former Brooklyn Historical Society. Back in October 2020, we became part of the Brooklyn Public Library and renamed ourselves the Center for Brooklyn History. One of the reasons why we have this little window of time right now where we can open for these programs is because we're waiting to find out when construction will begin on this building. And then we will close for even these kinds of programs for another period of time before we do a grand reopening, probably at the end of this year or early 2023. So I hope you'll all keep tabs on the things that are happening between now and then, and then mostly then when we reopen, because we'll have all sorts of reasons for you to come back. So tonight's program, One Man's Story of Gay Rights in Asylum, as you all very well know, is really featuring Edafe Okporo's new book, strong, powerful, amazing book, Asylum, a Memoir and Manifesto. I want to, of course, say Happy Pride Month. This is Pride Month, and I just want to, for a second, say, we have at the Brooklyn Historical Society taken pride in offering a lot of programs about the history of LGBTQIA+ population folks, queer history of New York. We've had George Chauncey, we've had Hugh Ryan. In fact, we've had an exhibition here that maybe some of you heard about based on Hugh Ryan's book, Queer Brooklyn. Eric Servini is part of the program. So this is exactly the kind of thing that our programs do. They talk about history that you may not have heard when you scratch the surface of the narratives that are generally told. I want to mention that we have another program coming up later this month, June 22nd. It's called A Rainbow Spin Through New York City, the LGBTQ Guide to a New York You Didn't Know. We'll be looking at the city, sites of gatherings, sites of protests, where change makers lived and led, and where history was made. And we'll be welcoming Alexis Clements, who, as you may know, works at the Lesbian Her Story Archives, and is a filmmaker for All We've Got. Ariana Martinez, a academic who focuses on queer immigrant enclaves, along with Penny Lewis, who's a co-author of A People's Guide to New York City, and others. So maybe you'll come back for that. So, but tonight, this book, Asylum, I'm not going to say too much about it because, why? I'll simply quote the New York Times review. Adele by Tricia Agni wrote, "This book is a passionate call for a more humane system for welcoming refugees into a country that prides itself on fighting oppression." And later goes on to say, "Asylum is a disquieting account that humanizes a nameless, faceless multitude entangled in an issue with no clear end in sight." We're really honored to have you here tonight in this room and with us. So thank you so much for being here, and Zach, for you too. So it's really, truly an honor to host this. So let me tell you just a little bit about Edafe and his conversation partner, Zach, and hand it off to them. Edafe Okporo was born in Lari, Nigeria. He migrated to the United States in 2016 as asylum seeker and is now a refugee in the United States. He is a global gay rights activist, the founder of Refugee America, Inc., and one of the country's most visible voices on the issue of displacement, especially LGBTQ displaced people. He is among the inaugural winners of the David Prize, which honors individuals and coalitions for creating a better and brighter New York City, and he is also a local attorney honoree. And tonight he'll be in conversation with Zach Stafford, who is an award-winning journalist, editor, and producer. Currently, he serves as a contributor to MSNBC. He's host of the Art Hard radio show, In the Deep Stories That Shape Us, co-producer of the Pulitzer Prize-winning musical Strange Loop. And prior to these roles, he was the first Black editor-in-chief of The Advocate. He served as the chief content officer of Grindr and was a journalist of The Guardian. He has written 2 books, Boys and When Dogs Heal, serves on the board of directors of the American LGBTQ Museum, and in 2019, he was included in the Forbes 30 list and also named as one of the 100 most influential Black people living today by their belief. So please help me welcome both of them, and thank you so much for being here.
It's so funny having a mic so close to me. I'm so excited to be here today because I have done many of these, and I'm also going to use my phone because I have notes on it. My airplane mode is on. I'm not texting. I have done many of these in my life due to my job, and I will say this is the one I'm most excited about because I actually like the book. The book is very, very good, and I'm sure many of you haven't read it because it just came out today. Congratulations, Edafe. I want to begin today with a little bit of, payback, which Edafe doesn't know I'm doing this. So we actually do know each other for years now. And I met Edafe because I would say 3 years ago, I was asked to be in a conversation similar like today's, but at Columbia University in Manhattan, with an academic, and it was about future queerness. And I had just left my job at Grindr, and I won't make a bad joke there, but I worked at Grindr, and it was very complicated and interesting. And I had just left my job there as chief content officer, and I'd become the editor-in-chief of The Advocate, which is something most people were really excited about. They're like, yay, finally a Black person is an editor-in-chief of a gay magazine. That's crazy. And I went to Columbia to talk about it in conversation with the academic. And at the end, there was a Q&A, and most people said really nice things to me, but one person did not say super nice things to me, and that was the governor. He approached the mic, and seeing a fellow Black queer person approach, I'm like, yes, this is my person. I'm at Columbia. It's very, very great. He's going to be really nice to me. And instead of being nice, he called me in, and I've never forgotten that moment, and it has led us to today. And Edafe told me and asked me, why did I leave my job at Grindr when so many people like him use Grindr in Nigeria to fight for their rights, to fight community, to really build a world that was more inclusive for them by using the app. And people don't realize that. And people actually don't know a lot of stories about folks like Edafe that have to use really complicated, sometimes contradictory systems just to survive and find community in the world around them. And Grindr is incredibly important in Nigeria for folks who just need a place to find others. And we at the company, when I worked there, did a lot to save people there, keep them safe there. And when I left, there were questions on if it would continue to be safe, and Edafe asked me about them in public in front of 500 people. And I think that's what really is what's so amazing about the work he's doing, and we're going to talk about today, is that he's willing to tell the truth no matter who he's telling the truth to. And so many people don't do that, ever. And I, since that moment, have been so impressed and proud. And we have worked together, and you've written articles with me, and all these things. So we're going to talk about all that today. One thing we're not going to do is go into too many details about the book, because who here has read the book?
Oh, wow.
So that's amazing. Wow, it just came out today. What did you do?
You got on Amazon, you got it yesterday.
Well, we're going to have a conversation where we'll talk about kind of like some stories in there, if you want to share some stories. But we just want to talk about kind of your work and what led you to today, and hope you guys can find it. So that's all good. There'll be Q&As at the end, and have a question.
I also have a story.
Yeah.
Today, like, we're celebrating Asylum, but
the reason why we had options of people I would do this conversation with. The first person that ever gave me a chance to tell my story was Zach, because Zach was working as the editor-in-chief of The Advocate, and they had a podcast. So I was in Los Angeles to speak at Grindr's headquarters. They flew me there. So they heard that I was in town. So Jeffrey was like, Zach has given me go ahead to do a podcast with you. And that podcast interview started my rounds in the media that led to this book. So I think that it's always good to acknowledge people who give you a break. So thank you very much. Although I called you out, it was love.
It was a beginning. So that's a good note. You can call people in and still be in community with them. That's like the best part about being. So, all right, let's get going. So, Edafe, around that time, 2019, President Trump has been in office. You were harassing me. You are doing a lot of work in America. What at that moment, and before this, but what really made you realize that you could tell your story in public and that it could bring change to people around you?
I didn't really know the power of storytelling. I did a bachelor's degree in food science and technology, and my minor was in chemical engineering. I was a science student. I love the sciences. There was a situation that happened in my country when I got my first job. I was posted for Youth Service Corps. I don't know if you guys know. It's like Peace Corps. You'll be posted somewhere. So I was posted to a rural community. Like, I was living in Atlanta and I'm posted to Maine for Youth Service Corps. When I got there, I was one of the only Christians there, one of the only people from the South, and I was gay, but I couldn't really say I was gay because they practice Sharia law. And one day, we're doing HIV services for pregnant women to prevent transmission from mother to child. And the community members went around and they were saying that I want to sleep with the women. Like, that's why I'm doing that job. So it was that moment I realized that if you don't tell your story, people can make narratives about you and it will really spread. So that was the point that I felt like for me to change the narrative about myself, I need to tell them why it was important to me. That I studied nutrition because I grew up in a community whereby malnutrition was prevalent. And if I see mothers that they could supplement their meal for the baby, it was a growth of mine, but it was through something like health services I could be able to tell that story. So that was like a changing point in my life in how people can control the narrative on the other.
That's a really, I've never heard that story from you. And that's already connecting with me to the book, in the first few chapters of your book, which I revisited today because I was just so stunned in your childhood, people were telling lots of stories about you. You weren't openly gay, but people kind of read you as queer, read you as differently. They're projecting all these narratives about you in the place in which you come from Nigeria. So when you're a kid and you were revisiting that in your book, what did it feel like to go back into that time where people were projecting narratives on you, telling stories about you that you weren't ready to tell about yourself yet?
Looking at it retrospectively, I feel like those moments kind of made me to be very vocal. Like, sometimes I want to keep quiet. I really do. But if I keep quiet, it's like I am allowing that child to continue being molested over and over again. Because if I look back, I really had a difficult childhood. But at then, it was the best I could have had. And although I had a difficult childhood, I still have a very good childhood compared to people in the community I grew up in. Because I was kind of smart a little bit. In my family, nobody had ever gotten an education. There was no example of what life would be if I go to school or if I challenge the system. I've always seen people that are like bowing down to the system. And I felt like I don't want to be that person. So I wanted to be distinctive from my molesters, abusers, people that are having the self-bigotry of no expectation. That so he wrote that to me once. So I was that person, and I didn't want to be that person anymore. And the only way I could be a different person was to have a voice.
Did it frighten you as a kid to know that about yourself, or to be struggling to have your own voice? Because what was interesting, when you read the book, you have a lot of strong personalities around you. A lot of people who are imposing a lot on you, a lot of women that are really taking care of you and not taking care of you at times. But what was it like to find your voice amidst all that kind of chaos around you?
I'm still that person today. Even my partner, my friends, they hate me sometimes because when they say, Edafe, don't do this, it's like, that is what I'm going to do. There was a time somebody told me that, why are you sharing stories? You have an accent, you are from Nigeria. Nobody wants to listen to you on NPR. That's what somebody told me in 2017 when I came out of the detention center. It's like, if you go on TV, a conservative, a white person from the middle of the country wouldn't want to listen to you. But I felt like for somebody to come after me, they have to be the first. And sometimes I pay dearly for being that kind of person that when people say no, I push forward. I pay dearly for it from society, workplace. The culture does not want you to be that person. And I think it's the sacrifice I have to pay for my community. And I was telling you backstage, like, the gay Nigerian community, they dislike me for that. There's so many gay Nigerians that have told me that I am too loud. That why am I doing this? Is it not okay to get asylum and keep quiet about it? Why do you have to like wash the dirty laundry out? So I feel like each and every time I receive a message like that, or I'm like challenging the system, I'm doing it for people that will come after me, for them to be able to have an opportunity not to be challenged by the system, because they can point to an example of somebody that have done it. And if I can achieve a little bit of like success doing that, I feel like I've done that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And something I'd love to dive in more there is this kind of tension between public and private life in Nigeria. Because I think a lot of people, especially Westerners, assume that queer people don't really exist in Nigeria, or many African nations, that they don't have communities, that they don't have bars, and it's quite the opposite. It just operates a little differently, and your book does go into that a bunch. So I'd love to go there with you. And can you tell us more about what is gay life like in Nigeria, especially before the moment in which World War II, where you have to come to the US, but what was it like to be gay there? What does community look like there that's different compared to the US?
I love being a gay Nigerian because I feel like if I don't want to sound like I'm against being a gay person in America.
I mean, I know.
Like being gay in America is very free, and sometimes we like lost the values of like being a gay person. I don't know what I'm saying right now. I'll say that again. I love being a gay Nigerian because in hiding, you find a very tight-knit community. Like, if you have been in a place whereby you can't be yourself, the only person you can be yourself around are other people like you. So when you come together, there's like a bond there. When I moved from my town to Abuja, where I lived a big part of my life, there's like classes of gay people in Abuja. If you live in Wuse, Guarimpa, you guys don't know where I'm saying, but it's like living in Manhattan and Brooklyn versus living in like Westchester or Poughkeepsie. So there's like a gay life in the city that is like fun. You go out with people, you have fun, and you go away. And there are people who are living in the outskirts of the city that can come to the city. So I found community there. I found people of like minds. And I felt safe because even though I don't have food, I know that I will have a place to stay. But in America, if I go to a gay person's house, they'll be like, when are you going to parent? It's just like the capitalist way of like living life. We live a more communal way that sometimes some people don't have a job for a very long time, but they can have a place to stay. So I think that discrimination and stigma from society makes us see why we should take care of each other more. So there was a time I went to a group for people living with HIV and AIDS, and they're like, you can't come into the group because you're not HIV positive. But like, I'm gay, they're like, this does not qualify. But outside that group, they are like my community members too. So it's like people living with HIV and AIDS also have a tight-knit community that they protect each other. Well, I really liked being a gay Nigerian because I felt like even though I fall through the cracks, I have a place I will stay at night. Something like that.
When you started writing about this part of your life, especially for an audience like ours, did you feel a certain burden to have more nuances in how you talked about it? Because I feel when I reread the work that you have a tremendous amount of care about Nigeria as a place and your community as a place. So was that intentional?
My agent, when I was writing the proposal, was like, I want Nigeria to loom so big in the book.
It's a character.
But I was trying to make it so small because I felt like I didn't want to be the person that would be criticizing Nigeria because I'm a Nigerian. I'm still a Nigerian, even though I'm a refugee here. And I felt like I had to take care of the community in a way, protect them. But I also did justice to the community. I wrote about somebody, Emmanuel, that died of AIDS and how it made me an activist. I wrote about Bobby, who was like my boyfriend, not my boyfriend, and he showed me love, compassion, and brought me under the care. That was what I was trying to refer to. It's like I left my city, I moved into a big city. Bobby was like, stay in one of my rooms, like come to my saloon, like took care of me. And I tried to like make their lives memorable in a book. You know, it's called a memoir. It's my journey and me telling my story. But if you read through the book, it's a lot of people's story. It's my tradition, my religion, how other influences, both social and cultural, comes to play a role in my life. And I felt like I did the best I could with where I was when I was writing the book because I was dealing with the trauma of not knowing who I was anymore. So, you know, after writing the book, I felt confident. After writing the first chapter and the second chapter, and I've been granted asylum, who am I? Am I still Nigerian? Am I a refugee? Am I, like, I couldn't tell who I was. So I was having personality crisis, and I decided to leave it the way it is with who I was then, and not allowing who I am now to like interfere into the process.
That's a lot to manage at one time. Who you are, who others are, how you represent your community, it's a big burden. Was it something that weighed heavily on you as you were typing away? Because also, for context, everyone, this stuff didn't happen that long ago. You know, when I met you in 2019, that was only a few years since you even got this faithful moment in JFK. So this has been what?
18 months.
Yeah, 18 months after that. So this has all been together 6 years of everything happening. So,
Almost 6 years.
yeah. So was writing kind of an active way to process everything for you in real time?
Not really. I was in therapy at the Baby Survival Protection Program from 2017 to 2018, almost 18 months. So I've done survival potential therapy. I've understood myself a little bit more. I won the David Prize, so I was like financially okay. And the biggest struggle for me when I was writing the book was like honoring the people who have passed, while also telling the joy in how they interacted with me. And when I was writing the book, at the very end, like I lost my dad. So it was very difficult to tell some people's story when they're no longer here. So I just kind of like avoided some things. I think I've been in therapy like almost my entire life in America because every day when I interact with people, I discover more and more how difficult life is for me because when I was younger, I was persecuted as a gay person. In my teenage years, I was persecuted as a gay pastor, teenager, coming out. And in like my middle age, I became a refugee. I've never known the joy of being a person that is not struggling. So that was the struggle I was having, is that can I also tell a story that brings joy? And I tried to do that with like, okay, I was a refugee, I was persecuted, all these things happened, yes. But look at me now. I graduated from NYU, I'm getting married, like life is okay with all this persecution. I think that was the battle, is that I don't want to tell a story that looks like, if another refugee reads the story, like there's no hope for me. I was trying to like put some hope into it. So I was protecting people from some of the trauma. I think so.
Yeah. And something you do really well in the book is, and there's a lot of hope there, but there's a lot of just reality of the circumstances of your life. And you do use joy to motivate or push us through, but it doesn't present kind of this, what I would say is a stereotypical asylum story that is, you went through something terrible in your country of origin, and then one day you have this really exciting event, and then you come to the US, and then everything's great. It doesn't happen for you, right?
No.
You got your things were not great.
No.
Can we talk about that some more? About why wasn't it great? Why was that such an important part of your book? Because it is a large part of your book. It's not like, I think if you haven't read this before and how I thought of it when you told me about it, I was like, okay, we're going to talk a lot about Nigeria, it's going to be the US, there's going to be a detention center, and then you get out, it's kind of like Will Smith in The Pursuit of Happiness, like you kind of get the job, it's like, ta-da, and none of that happens. It's kind of, things get worse in some ways. Can we talk more about that?
I think that's the central idea of the book, is that, when people think about refugees and displaced people, and this is what I have tried to do all throughout my life, is to start by shining a light on an issue that most Americans, Democrats, independent, people who live in liberal areas, kind of pretend like it doesn't happen. And that really drives me crazy all the time, is that when people come here to seek protection, we're like, oh, let's welcome them to America. Yes. How do we welcome them to America? At the airport, I was handcuffed, kept in a jail, great. They were like, we're trying to make sure you're documented, you are safe, and you're not a criminal. All those have happened. And I have been granted the permission to stay in America. And what happened next? The night I was granted asylum, they're like, open the door and go. I came to America at JFK. I was detained in New Jersey. The only thing I've seen is the George Washington Bridge, very beautiful, with lights at night. Like, no metro card. I didn't know, I've never taken a train. Like, I might sound ignorant, but it's the truth. There was no mass transit like train where I grew up in. There's a train that takes cargo, so I've not taken a train. I didn't know how to move around, so I was with my bag that night, and I didn't have anywhere to go to. That is the experience of most people who are granted asylum in America. After that, I stayed at YMCA. From the YMCA, I didn't know what to do next. When I came to Manhattan the first time, I came to greet my lawyer. Beautiful office in Fifth Avenue. They were like, oh, welcome to America. That's it. I have to figure everything one step after the other. The most humiliating experience I felt I experienced is not homelessness. It's not trying to look for food to eat. It's when it came to employment. I paid these people that do like employment services $350 in Queens. And I just came to America. They're like ripping me off. So they're like, go, we'll look for a job for you. And they sent me to a refrigerating place that I'm going to pick apples. I was like, I had a bachelor's degree from my own country. I had a master's degree. They're like, no, you're picking apples. So most people, when they come to this country, with all the experiences they have to start all over again. And life can be very, very difficult when you start all over again. Just anybody imagine like you just packed everything you have and moved to a country whereby people dress differently, they look differently, they talk differently. And in America, that's the worst because they try to distinguish themselves from the rest of the world. Like the weather, I use Celsius, it's Fahrenheit, like very simple thing. It's not simple for a displaced person. They're like language, we spell differently. So it's like a re-education of your entire life. While we are trying to also have food to eat, close to here, trying to live, find community. I remember once I went to the Monster Bar, a gay bar. You know, when you come to a new country, if you're a refugee from any other background and you're not LGBTQ, you can go to UNHCR, IAS, or so many other organizations. But as a gay person, you want to go to the LGBTQ center, or a gay bar, or Grindr, where have you? But it's so hard because if you go to Grindr, people sexualize you, you're black, you're gay, this. If you go to Monster Bar, people are like having fun, having their life is going on. Go to the LGBTQ centers like young people, 19, 17, you know, at the time. So I was like trying to figure out where do I fit in America. And it was very, very hard to put it like
It's something you talk about in the book, and you definitely been talking about in the press, is that when folks go through the journey that you've been on, that they don't usually report back to those in the other countries saying how hard it was, that it was difficult, that people weren't welcome. You tell a different story. And even when you were in detention in New Jersey, you're not able to call family. No one really knows. And I know in the book you take a lot of care to talk about, you know, I don't want to worry my family. I'm in the spirit, but I don't want them to know how bad this is. But you write about how bad it is. Why is that? What are you hoping to accomplish with that?
Remember I said in the book that I haven't told my mother yet. Because I wrote how bad it is because I feel like Asylum is mostly written for an American audience to have an idea of what displaced people go through. Because if I'm writing for Nigerians, they don't care if you go and seek asylum in another country. But I want Americans to know how difficult. Because you know, when you see a refugee, you're like, oh, this person is resilient, is courageous, great. But there's so many people, many of us lack awareness of how difficult it is to really go through this system. When I was in the detention center, I remember that I didn't know that a pizza is $1, a slice of pizza is $1. So our room was the cleanest, deep down. And they brought a tray of pizza. We were celebrating, like, yay! And when I came to America, when I came to New York and I went to a pizza shop, I like, give me a slice of pizza, they're like, it's $1. I was like, $1? And we were celebrating that at the detention center. Because if I work a day at the detention center, I get paid $1. So, I don't want to talk about this, but it's like so dehumanizing. Like if I think about it, it still worries me. And the reason why I really wrote about it is that a lot of people were sharing me when I was leaving the detention center, hey, that we want your asylum. 99% of those people will never get asylum. They will never get a refugee status. They will always be persecuted. And we sit around every single day and pretend like as if it's okay for displaced people because we have offered them an opportunity to rebuild their lives. And it's just so heartbreaking all the time.
Yeah, and it's something, you know, you really, when we met years ago, I had already as a reporter begun shifting a lot of my focus over the magazines I was overseeing to try to like tell more human stories because, you know, I never really heard a human, complicated, dynamic story of someone that is displaced or someone going through the system. And, you know, I personally, we talked about this earlier, I was sent to Tijuana in 2019 when the Trumps had forced to close the border. 2019. And there were the caravans to go. And I was asked to go down on the behalf of groups and interview folks in safe houses that were trans, and record their stories for the Library of Congress. And when I met with these people, a lot of them were trans, they were telling their stories not because they thought they'd be able to cross the border, but because they didn't think they were going to survive crossing the border ever. And they needed someone to know that they made it. And what you're hitting on right now is that what I've learned from my relationship with you and the reporting on this is like getting to even the part where you're at is so tremendously hard. And the worst thing that happens next once you survive all of this and they open the doors to America is that America pushes you down. They open the foot back in.
You know, when you're new, I think people try to help you in a way, kind of like in a tokenized way, like I want to help you with stuff like that. It's very difficult to survive America. The first time most Americans will interact with like a displaced person, it might be in the workplace. And in the workplace, you see people are like, oh, why do you dress like that? Oh, why do you write this sentence like that? This is American English, different from British English. Why do you eat this food? Why do you do this? Why do you do that? So when I was writing Asylum, I was thinking about it. It's like the empathy and compassion people lack for the struggle it takes for a displaced person to rebuild their lives is baffling. If after suffering displacement, we could also continuously reinvent ourselves to be compatible to the US society, why does the US society not do half of the work? So we meet halfway. And that was what I was thinking all the time. It's like, there's nothing I would say that would really change people's idea about who a refugee is or who a displaced person is, except I humanize the story from my point of view, is that the Edafe you know, the Edafe you like, is like all those other people that would not also get the opportunity. You know, in America, we do this all the time. We celebrate a few refugees, like Malama Yousafzai, like this, like I think like this refugee did this. But we also forget that there's so many refugees that are not disabled. They don't want to talk about their refugee status. But they're doing good every single day in our community. We're just quiet about it. I decided to be loud about it because there's a new set of refugees. This is LGBTQ people. We're really different from other set of refugees. We suffer a different set of issues that traditional refugees go through in addition to what we go through. Historic marginalization for being gay, lack of visibility. When I was in the detention center, a trans person was in the detention center with me. She came from Honduras. She's a woman with all features of being a woman, but she couldn't change her birth certificate in her own country. They kept her in a male detention center with other guys. She couldn't pee, she couldn't shower, she couldn't do any single thing. When you come out of the detention center, you go into a shelter. In the shelter, there's lack of signs of visibility that you are welcome here. No pride flag, no stories that talk about you. Your pronouns are not affirmed. These are little things that is telling you that you are not welcome here. In addition to that, LGBTQ rights are being threatened in America. So imagine you being a gay person coming to America like, oh, I'm going to live my gay life. And you're like, it's so hard to be a gay person. In addition, being a refugee, it's just like complicates your life every single day. It's not like I'm giving you guys a downer, but like everything I'm saying is a couplet of what LGBTQ refugees go through. And I cannot even say it enough. I wish there are like 17 others of us here that would say how difficult it is to be a gay refugee. But the truth is that my story would not have been possible in any other place. It's New York, it's New Jersey, it's all of you. Because I know it's okay to celebrate somebody for being able to be out and spoken. But when I was given a job at that picking apples place, it was somebody that heard me speaking in a church that said, can you send me your resume? And I will connect you to a job. There's another person that said, oh, I'll give you an opportunity to write your story in a magazine. I will edit your story, I will do this, I will do that. And I think that as much as it burdens us that what we can do, I think we can't really change the system because it's been a very long time that comprehensive immigration reform has been done in America. As much as it downs you, I think you should think about what little act of kindness I could do that could impact somebody's life. And if we can start from there, we can begin to change the conversation that will lead to systemic change. And that is why it's one man's story that I hope can open the door for the conversation that we can reflect on ourselves. Like, I'm a Democrat. I use that a lot of the time. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a US citizen. But people will say I'm a Democrat, I'm a liberal, or I vote left-leaning politics. We focus all our money on politicians that would never affect change on a granular level. 1.5 billion was donated to the Biden campaign. We have less than 200 million electorate in America. If we divide that money to all the electorate, each person will get $7 million to solve all our problems in America. So I don't want to say we should stop giving to politicians, but we should start thinking, how do we give our money to be able to solve problems on a community level? We can't really change Mississippi and Missouri and how they treat immigrants. But even in New York, there are detention centers. In New Jersey, there are detention centers. In New York, asylum seekers are still having to resort to sex work for them to be able to have a place to stay. There are people who are told to get infected with HIV so they can have housing for people living with HIV and AIDS. There are people who have resorted to like, I can't do it anymore, I'll just sleep on the train. And we can make a difference in those people's life. And that is what I saw in myself. Like, instead of me to think about how hard it is, I was like, what can I do to really help my community? When I was working in the shelter, it was like the basement of the church. But I was like, if I could save somebody from saying, I will go and get HIV, I will do sex work. I prefer to do that than to think about changing Biden administration, which is almost impossible.
You know, the book isn't just a memoir, but it's also a manifesto. It famously says that. Once you read it, you're like, oh, yeah, I get it. Because the back half is this. This is very much the back half of the book. It's kind of a call to action. And, you know, I have to point out the obvious that you are releasing a manifesto calling us to change the systems that make America not so welcoming at a time where I think many of you, I'm going to speak for many of you, probably feel a little disheartened about America. Currently, there are more anti-LGBTQ bills rolling through legislations than ever before. I think we're at 181 as of today. A lot of people are feeling like, what am I even fighting for being here? Should I move to Portugal? Should I go all these things? I hear these all the time from people. Rich New Yorkers say that. One move to Portugal. So what do you say to people that say that? You know, you are asking for us to have radical reform, to reimagine a place that we have called home in our lives at a time that a lot of us want to leave.
I always have a question that bothers me all the time. When we talk about refugees and displaced people, like we distance ourselves from the issue, like it cannot happen to us. But I just want to call all of us to think like one simple action. Just imagine. Many people will say it's not possible, but I want you to imagine that Manhattan is being flooded right now, and we all have to flee. Where are we going to go to? Many people will be like, we'll go up north. I'm like, okay, if Buffalo is also flooding, where do we go to? We're like, we go to Canada. I'm like, why? We're like, Canada is accepting of refugees. So what is Canada doing that the US cannot do? I always ask myself that question. In 2018, I went to Canada to give a talk, 3 days. And I saw some refugees. And I asked them, where do you stay? Like, I came 2 weeks from Ethiopia. The government gave me housing here. It's like a bunk bed. They're giving me $350 Canadian every month. And that is taking care of me right now. I went to the Netherlands. The government gave them 400 euros every month, and they give them housing. Almost every country do that. Why can't the US do that? There's an argument that will come from one side of the aisle that you don't want to give handouts to displaced people. But tell me, is immigration net positive or net negative? It's net positive. We rely on undocumented workers to survive as an economy. Our food, transportation, everything we do. So it's just like we are afraid to answer the question because we know that if we reflect on those questions, we will come up with a solution. And the solution is simple. No one who comes to the United States should have to go through private prisons. Let's start with that. Because it costs the US government more to keep people in a private detention center than to allow them to roam around the streets. So that is the first thing I am advocating for, is that we should abolish private prisons. It's a systemic work that is progressing. In California, they will outlaw by 2028. New Jersey, where I was detained, Elizabeth, they will outlaw by 2026. That means private prisons is going away. But we have to do that continuously in every state, like the way we did gay marriage in America. Then, when people come here, I think, even though we're not giving them handouts, so-called, if people are giving work authorization to be able to work in America, that would be transformative. These are two legislation on the larger level that can help people live normal lives in America. But on a granular level, I remember when I was running a shelter, somebody named Esther came to the shelter to live with us. Last year, June, we bought a house in New Jersey. And just imagine how many people would live wholesome lives if they are given an opportunity to have a fair start in America. Currently, there are no shelter in New York City. Try to look for a shelter for an asylum seeker to stay. Right now, there is none in New York City. Why can't we do that? But if you are HIV positive, you will get a voucher for a place to stay. If you are mentally, if you have a mental illness, they will look for a place for you to stay. So we can't protect people if they are not sick. No offense. I think that the best way for us to create change is for us to continue to support grassroots organizations that are doing change work in America. I know many people that donate to HRC, I don't want to mention it.
Those like big
Big organizations. They have millions of dollars. They don't really make change anymore. They're bureaucrats. They did the work that led to this place right now, but the people that will take it from here onward are grassroots. So if you want to support an organization, I think you should support a grassroots organization. Learn more about what they're doing and how you can be able to create change. There's so many grassroots organizations in New York City. QDEM, they help co-educate refugees. Caribbean Equality Project in Queens, like Bronze Defenders, Asylum Connect, so many organizations that are doing this work. I think we can start from there. They are very under-resourced, they are understaffed, they need support. And if we can support them, they can be able to help more people, like Desta, to be able to say, I came to America, I got a place to stay, I won my asylum, I got a job, and now this is what life looks for me.
So we're almost to Q&A, so begin thinking of your questions when I ask this next final question. And with conversations like this, I always like to end on a note of joy, which you brought up a bunch, And it's not just because I want to like raise the mood, but I like to do it because it's a reminder that when we are fighting for human equity or civil rights, that it should feel good to see people get their rights, and it should feel good to see people live another day and housing, all these things. We should always center joy in all these movements. And everyone from Black Panther will say that, and any other radical activist that wait centuries to that. So, for you, Edafe, you are getting married this year. You have a life, you live here, you have a book out. What's it like to have so much joy in your life right now?
I think I'm processing what joy really is. Because, at the moment, I still struggle with like living in the moment with the joy. It's always in the future or in the past. 2 years ago, January 2020, December 2019, when I wanted to go back to do my master's, I applied for a master's program. So I told my partner, I have 3 things that are on the books. I want to write a book, I want to have a master's, and I want to get married. So in June, when my agent found me and was like, you're going to write a book, I already got admitted. I haven't gotten admitted into NYU, so I was like, okay, if I sell my book, if I get admitted, or if I win the David Prize, because they were all in the running, then I will celebrate. In October, I sold my book, I won the David Prize, I was in school, I said, if I graduate, if my book gets published, and when I get married, I will celebrate. I graduated last month, the book is published today. I'm getting married this month. And I want to say, if this happens or if that happens. So I think I'm just going to stop at this point.
Yes, you should. Yes.
I'm not having any wishes anymore in my life. I'm just going to be like a human being, live in the present moment and be happy, because I feel like I really have lived a very full life, both good and bad, a lot of good things, because I don't show a lot of the good things that happen in my life. People don't see it, but I do have a good life.
Yes. I like you fought very hard for it.
Yeah.
So, we all have to acknowledge that. And what my reminder to you is you should feel joy in the present. You don't need to keep pushing goalposts further and further. You deserve to feel happiness. It's there is. All right, so we will move to questions if people have them.
Before we do Q&A, I just want to say something that, we're in June, it's Pride Month. Many people could have done so many other things today. There's no DJ, there's no alcohol.
There's not.
And you guys are here. I really, really appreciate you all showing tonight. It means a lot. Thank you.
And I would push the people that have read the book to ask questions, because you did the homework. So there you go. There you go. Anything applaud? Wow. Sorry.
Hi there. I haven't actually read the book, but I'm curious in the process of writing it. Were you forced to relive some of that trauma, or was it therapeutic, or did you think back to experiences and you got pissed about it? If you will?
So the strange thing is that I didn't know I was going to write a book. I was doing a podcast on Instagram during George Floyd murder, and the person I was doing the Instagram with said, have you written a book? I said, no. He said, I will talk to my agent. So the agent wrote me the next day. I'm like, oh, let's chat. And as he was talking to me, he was like, I think you have a book here. So I was listening to the podcast, this. I didn't know how to write a book, I swear. My agent is an editor himself, so he was like, helping me, I think this idea is good, I think this idea is good. I read this article, I think you should add this. That was how I got the proposal. Then he left me, when I sold the book. So as I was writing the book, I began to discover more and more what I want to say and how I want to say it. So when Simon and Schuster bought the book, I think it gave me more courage to be like, I deserve to write this book, kind of like validation. So I think the most important things is that the chapter ending kind of gave the tone of that chapter. So you say black, gay, refugee, or fate in the West or fate in West Africa, or like that. So when I have the title, I now think about what stories are going to make this work. And that is how I wrote the book. Intentionally, the book was meant to motivate people to take action. That is the idea of the book. But if people do not know what the author has gone through, why would they take action? So that's why I went into my childhood to tell stories that portray the true line of my life. There are 6 central characters that underline the book. Being a displaced person, being gay, being religious, being black, being African, and also being a resilient human being. Because you see, I was the first person in my family to have an education and so many other struggles like that. So I think that there are people along the way that help the book become what it is. My agents, the editor that's worked with me on the book. I love the vision of the book, and he's a gay person too. So it's like, what would Americans think of when you read it like this? So people along the way made the book what it is. If you saw the proposal and the finished book, it was like 360. So, people celebrate a book, but it takes a lot to get a book done. There are people in the publishing house that are tirelessly making sure everything is like what it is, like in this format. Because when I even read the book, I was like, oh, I wrote this, oh, I wrote that. Because I was reading it again, and it's like so interesting. So I think that the only thing I wish I did more of is like tell the story of my father. Because when he died, I felt like I couldn't really say much about him, so I kind of removed a lot of the things I wrote about him. And it looked like as if I don't have a father, but I do have a father. So that's it.
In the book, there's a whole chunk about your religion, and there's a whole storyline with that. And you mentioned it now as something that is constitutive of your identity. And I'm just interested in like how does your religion play into your identity now in the US? As because it kind of doesn't make it to the first the gay displaced person from Africa. It doesn't, but you're obviously Christianity is important. I was wondering about that.
For context, you are or were a pastor.
Yeah. I think that organized religion is like a place of community. I attended a Unitarian church because I found community there. I love the community that organized religion brings. It's like being a gay person. Gay people, we have organized religion on our own. So when you meet another gay person, it's like, thank you, Jesus. It's like that. The most interesting thing with religion for me is when I met my partner, he doesn't know anything about the Bible. So one day, I hope you're not offended that I tell the story. One day, he said something about Jesus and the Bible. I was so pissed. So I was like, you don't. So he was laughing about it. I just making him. I was like, if you continue like this, I can't be in a relationship with you. I'm just making it straight. Like, if you don't like the Bible or you don't know the Bible, the worst thing you can do is to offend somebody that believes in the Bible. Do I believe in the Bible in entirety? Not really. But those stories were foundation in who I am, because the stories in the Bible kind of portray stories of resilience, faith, like things like that. And I still believe in some of those stories because they were ingrained in me as a child. And I still pray sometimes, but my partner is not really that like Christianity kind of person. So I pray on my own. I leave that on the side of the bed. I was eating one day. We were about to eat, so I prayed in my head and I did the sign of the cross. And I was like, what is happening? I was like, I just prayed. I was like, oh, I've never seen you do that before. I was like, I don't want to make you uncomfortable. So, like, before I came here, I knelt down to God and prayed that at least there should be one person here. So, if I'm having anxiety, I do resort to like praying to God. But I don't go to a church. I don't have the Bible on my bedside. It's just like made me who I am very consistent. And I can't stop being that person.
Almost there. Any
Do one more.
Hi there. So my name is Julian Omatoto or Omatoto. So I'm Nigerian as well. My parents are from Nigeria. They moved in 1988. I am a transgender woman and also queer. That's complicated, but yeah. But I thought I'd say hi, and I also felt like I'm also writing a memoir. My friend Monica actually invited me over to this event because of all these interloping things in my way, and I guess I'll ask what advice do you have as far as utilizing struggle as a means of teaching? Where does it come in?
You know, I don't know a lot about how to teach with struggle. You know, I don't know a lot of things. I know very small amount of things, and I kind of drive in. I think that majority of my life, luck has played a role. I feel so. I'm not going to cry, but I feel like I've been a very lucky person because I met some people with just like hello, and they're like, you want to write an article for LGBT magazine? You want to do a BuzzFeed article? I did an article for BuzzFeed. I and Zach edited the article for a month. He will go back and be like, add this thing to the article. I'm like, can you publish it? He was like, go back, bring 2 more stories. Go, and he later published the article. So I think it's your personal struggle. Well, my advice is that whatever works for you, like lean into it deeply. And what has worked for me is like going out, meeting people, saying hello, becoming my friends, having lunch with them, and they might find the story important to tell, and I end up telling that story. I didn't see the narrative arc of like struggle in my storytelling. It was when I compiled a lot of the articles that I wanted to use for the book proposal that I saw the narrative arc. I was just telling the story because I thought it was important, but I have to tell it. Even though I would lose opportunities to be the descent refugee or the descent Nigerian, I just wanted to tell the stories. So I think that if the struggle is something you can't live without, and the only way you can be free of that struggle is to write it out, then you have to do it because it continues to haunt you. But you also have to think of your safety. If I do this, it's published in the New York Times, what will happen next?
And I guess you didn't ask me, but I love that you shared that. Is I did this a series of work. It's called The No Skill. It's a collection of HIV positive people telling their story of surviving and thriving after diagnosed with HIV through the stories of their dogs, their relationship dogs. Because HIV positive people have a very high rate of adopting dogs right after domestic custody. And what that process was like, there's so many people saying, I struggled, I went through this. And the thing that we always told them for 5 years was that, but you overcame. And I think that's always a powerful moment for struggle, is that you're showing people that you overcame. And I think Edafe, that's why I love this book so much, is that I have spent so much of my life as a reporter, as a journalist, with people who weren't able to overcome these systemic reasons, the cultural reasons for all these things. Those of us that do overcome should talk about it. And that's what I tell everyone today. So
Even before I overcame, I was still telling the story. When I was in New Jersey, nobody knew me. I was still telling the story. Jane, remember when we traveled to South Jersey? We went to an event, all white folks. I was the only person of color. I and Jane went with. She drove. And I was talking about my story to an audience that don't know like Jack what I was saying. But I thought it's important that they too should know what is happening in North Jersey. Even though I don't have it all together. So I think that it is important you have to tell it. Even through telling it, you might overcome. Let's take it to church.
Thank you. I just want to thank you for your book, thank you for your work, but thank you for this, real conversation. And if you have the book, Edafe has agreed to sign them. We have a table downstairs. There are books for sale downstairs. So please let's all convene down there and celebrate this work.
Okay, great. Are we taking it with the audience too?
Can we do that?
Yeah. How was the best thing?
You want to sit there?
Oh, we might have to watch us take a picture, yes.
It's good to
So